You can't fly a drone over a prison. But what if my hobby is taking pictures of prisons with a drone?
Yeah. Is your hobby also using your drone to drop weapons and drugs inside the prison? Is that also your hobby?
That's more of an employment thing
Sure.
than a hobby.
Sure. Welcome to Silverman Law Firm's Weekly Docket, episode 55, where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is January 30th, 2025, and I'm Phil Silverman, owner of the firm and your host, and I'm joined by Austin Black, our co-host, who works in our Dallas office today. How are you doing today, Mr. Black?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
I am phenomenal. Super excited about some of the topics on this show, more so than other topics. I just feel like we've got some interesting topics on the show today.
Great.
So, what's on our docket today, Mr. Black?
For our legal news section, we only have one thing we're going over today, and it'll be relatively short. But the state of Texas wants a Bitcoin reserve. They want to keep Bitcoins owned by the state. A far cry from people attempting to outlaw the usage of cryptocurrency, but we'll talk about what exactly that looks like then. Moving on to our legal questions section, we will answer the question first: why is it so hard to fire federal employees? Can you just go up to them and say, "Hey, you're fired, Mr. Postman"? Usually no. We'll tell you why. And you can't just fire them because they decided to start not coming in rain, sleet, shine. They don't hold to that whole mantra anymore, but you can't fire them because of it. Okay. And then what is the law on flying drones in Texas? There are quite a few laws about flying drones in Texas, and each state has their own requirements on it. We'll let you know what those are in Texas in case you ever want to fly a drone here. And then we have a special section today that is going to be going over certain facts and statistics related to lawyers. This isn't really a rant and rave section, but it will be in place of it. And we will let you know maybe some things that you didn't know about lawyers and maybe you didn't want to know, but you'll know it after this. Okay, that is our show today.
Yeah, I was surprised by just so many things on this show when I was doing the research for it. And I think because I've practiced law for a pretty long time now, you think things and then you just constantly have changes in the law and things that surprise you and statistics about your own profession that shock you. So anyway, that being said, let's get it kicked off with our legal news section. And the first topic we're talking about is the state of Texas wants a Bitcoin reserve. Let me start off with, because I think a lot of our listeners are a little unclear about what a reserve is. So governments typically have a reserve of something, right? If you're the United States, you have the luxury of not really keeping much of a reserve of anything except because you are the world's currency in the United States dollar, right?
We keep a reserve of bullets.
We do. That's actually very important. Military reserves. We have an oil and gas reserve. I think we have some form of gold reserve. Other nations,
strategic resource reserves are much more important than any sort of fiat at the moment. So,
well,
yeah.
But if you're another country, if you don't have, all other countries don't have the luxury of the United States dollar, you have to have other things on reserve. But
frequently U.S. dollars.
Yes, frequently U.S. dollars. But now that Bitcoin has been around for a little while, countries and states now are starting to think about Bitcoin as a potential reserve. State of Texas, our home state, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, he's prioritized this initiative in the 2025 legislative agenda, and he's calling it the Bitcoin Reserve Project. Yeah. And it's been this bill has been introduced by Senator Charles Schwartner this January, and he's supporting the move, and it's going to allow Texas to accept tax payments in Bitcoin. And if we get this passed, Austin, we'll be the first state to officially hold Bitcoin as a reserve asset.
That would be awesome, actually. I think that'd be a really good thing.
You think that's a good thing? And is that because you want to secede from the United States?
It's not because I want to secede from the United States. It is actually because I've been following how Costa Rica has been using Bitcoin recently. And I don't know if you know this, but Costa Rica is one of the few jurisdictions in the entire world where it's legal for employers to pay their employees in cryptocurrency. And so Bitcoin is very frequently used there, and it's helped their economy a lot. It's interesting. I think it would help the Texas economy too.
That's an excellent point. I was joking with Austin about secession, but we covered that on another show. But you can see some of these people from Texas being like, "Hey, let's secede from the union, and we've got Bitcoin. We don't need the United States dollar anymore." And the state of Texas, if it were judged on its own accord, it would be the 8th largest economy in the world. So we could make Bitcoin work. But so you think it's a good idea? It worked for Costa Rica. I think it's a bad idea. I'm a little concerned about the volatility of the asset. You collect a bunch of revenue, or you have a bunch of reserve in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin can have these like wild swings of 20% in a day. All of a sudden you've got the state losing a lot of tax revenue in dollar terms. And that could be a bad thing. But I think if Texas were to do it, it would appropriately diversify the reserve, I think. So it's not like we'd have it all in Bitcoin, but
yeah, it would be a problem to have it all in Bitcoin, but
yeah. And if you're listening, while this isn't a financial show, you should probably not have the majority of your assets in Bitcoin either. If you're a crypto Austin's.
I don't know. I will say, if you had the majority of your assets in Bitcoin, you did years ago, you were doing very well, right?
Well, it works until it doesn't, but
it's been working for a while though.
Yeah, we'll see how much longer that goes. But Texas is getting ready to pass this, so we'll see if it gets passed and we can start having some Bitcoin reserve. And if you're out there and maybe you own a home and you're paying property tax, maybe the local governments, or if you're paying sales tax, or if your business paying sales tax, or you're like us, Austin, our law firm, we pay something called franchise tax. We've talked a lot about that on the show. All of a sudden, we could start maybe taking some payments from clients in Bitcoin and making our franchise tax payment to the state of Texas in Bitcoin. So
I have had one potential client ask if they could pay us in Bitcoin. One.
I used to have we have a client that does real estate deals, and he would try to do these commercial transactions. And when you're doing real estate deals in Texas, you're typically dealing with older, more traditional people. And he would always have us in the contract try to negotiate payment in Bitcoin. And it was such a distraction, and it like never worked. And finally he gave up because he needed to build things. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. All right, that's our legal news section for the day. Let's go ahead and move on to our legal questions section.
Okay. Why is it so hard to fire federal employees? If you want to fire the postmaster, why is it hard to do that?
And this is legal news too, because Trump wants to shrink the government, right? And Doge, Department of Government Efficiency with Elon Musk and all that. Austin, you can't laugh audibly when I call out the name of a legitimate.
I have to laugh when we have a government agency named Doge. Okay. That's the point of it.
Okay. Yes. We want to shrink the government. We want it to become more efficient, right? So Trump signed an executive order reclassifying government employees under the Civil Service Reform Act. They call it Schedule F, right? And what that means is, and I think we've got to go the background of why is it so hard to fire a federal employee. If you are a rank and file federal employee, okay, so let's say you work for the IRS and you're an auditor, or you work for the Department of Labor, you have a property right in your job. That's different than, Austin, our relationship and your employment with the firm where you're an at-will employee. And if you say something I really don't like on the podcast, I can just be like, Austin, you're fired, right? That's at-will employment. Government employees have a vested property right in their job. In fact, I have an aunt in Washington, D.C., and she had a previous job, and her job was she was an administrative law judge. And all she did for a period of time was hear appeals or cases against federal employees that were trying to be fired. So you have this property right if you're a federal employee. It's under Civil Service Reform Act. And if you're protected in this way, you have to give, before you fire the guy, you've got to give them 30 days notice. You have to give a detailed description of their alleged misconduct, and they've got the right to appeal. It's a whole thing. Okay.
Yeah. And you have to fire them for cause, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just say, no, you're gone.
Right. And they're
Yeah.
unionized. So Trump is reclassifying them by 50,000 government employees, and he wants to reclassify them as something called a Schedule F employee. Now, what is that? That's an employee. If you're a Schedule F employee, you're an employee that has some sort of policy making role. Okay. You're like someone important, like you're almost like a political figure. Those types of government employees are not protected under the Civil Service Reform Act in as many ways. They're not
Yes.
unionized, right? That's like a cabinet member. Like Trump can fire the Secretary of State anytime he wants. He has that power.
He can fire Marco Rubio anytime he wants.
Anytime he wants. He's reclassifying them so he can fire them. And then once he signed that executive order, he was immediately sued by the Federal Employees Union to avoid the order. Trump is trying to reclassify it, get these 50,000 people fired, reclassified as political. So and it's called Schedule F because under the Civil Service Reform Act, there's a little known provision under Schedule F that allows this kind of exemption to be fired if you're a determining policy making or policy advocating character, right? And Trump did this in his first term. So, and now he's reinstituting it. That's the legal news component of it. And that's why it's so hard to fire federal employees. You just don't get to fire them. But let me ask you this, Austin, just in your opinion, what is your general opinion of federal employees? Are they hardworking? Do they work less? Do they work more? What are your thoughts?
My opinion is that lower level federal employees typically don't do much.
Okay.
But higher level ones do a lot.
Okay. Well, my opinion before I looked at any studies was that they barely work at all. That's based on the fact I can never get the IRS to answer the phone. I can never get any help from any federal agencies when I'm doing compliance stuff.
Sure.
But I guess they would say that, that's because we're so busy on other stuff. We're just understaffed, but we're still hardworking. Cannot actually find any good data on it. So I think there's a bias. Yeah. I think there's a bias in that. I tried searching Google and I was just like, what are the statistics on the number of hours that federal employees work in a week? I could get like nothing in Google search results. No AI generated context from Gemini, who probably wasn't capable of helping because it was a politically inflammatory question. So I turned where I really did not want to go, which was DuckDuckGo. And I did find a study from the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative foundation, and they cited a Department of Labor study that found this. I thought this was pretty good. Do you have the number up there?
Yeah, it's found that federal employees work 38.7 hours a week versus private sector employees that work 41.4 hours a week. So
I thought that was pretty good. Way better than I would have anticipated. I don't know how accurate that is. The Reddit comments, I always go to Reddit. Do you read Reddit at all now, Austin, or not really?
Yeah, I use it.
I always think from a subjective qualitative analysis, if you really want to know like what the real deal on opinions are, you can go to Reddit and hopefully you're getting a human and not AI.
Yeah.
The Reddit stuff was all over the board. There were like a lot of anonymous government employees and they have classifications like I'm a G13 employee, whatever that means. And I work 2 to 4 hours a day or and then some of them said, oh no, I work 50 hours a week. But there are a lot of them out there that are like, oh, I barely work at all. So I guess that's why we need Doge to try to find all this waste because government is too big and the employees are inefficient, right? So yeah, that's what it is. All right, that's the answer to that question.
I mean, supposedly a lot of them are quitting anyways because they're being forced to go back to the office. So
yeah, there is that whole return to work, return to the office mandate kind of thing. After COVID, months and months after COVID, I visited my family in DC, the same aunt and uncle that live in DC, and they live like right near kind of the center of DC where all the government employees are. And I was shocked to see the vacancies of like restaurants and retail that was normal, that was full because they had been shut down because all the government employees were not going into work and they were not frequenting those establishments. All right, we got to move on to our next legal question.
Okay.
And we're talking about drones.
Drones.
Okay. Do you do any drone flying?
I don't do any drone flying. No, when I was younger, I flew some remote controlled airplanes, but never any drones. So
okay. we're talking about what is the law on flying drones in Texas. This became really popular with all those drones in New Jersey, and people
Mhm.
were freaking out about it. You heard that government then reaffirmed that, oh, those were just completely regulated FAA approved drones and normal flight behaviors, and there was nothing nefarious going on about that.
Yes,
So
nothing nefarious.
I
Nothing.
guess what's the main law in Texas that regulates drone flying, Austin?
It is chapter 423 of the government code.
Yeah, I clicked on the link and started to read it, and it was way too voluminous, and I was like, I gotta find a summary. So you have Texas government code. You also have the FAA that regulates a lot of this stuff. The FAA is going to require registration if your drone is over 0.55 pounds. So there's
And
really,
less than 55 pounds.
yeah. I don't know what happens if you go over 55 pounds.
My drone is 500 pounds.
I don't know what you do. I think you're like,
That's completely legal. You can fly that right here. You do not need any sort of permitting or anything.
I don't know. But the only thing I could find is if all the drones that you buy, like if you just go to Walmart and you want to buy a drone for a birthday present for your kid or something, those are all under 0.55 pounds because it doesn't require a registration. So if you're going to do anything commercial, it's going to require some type of registration as well. And here's a little general law for you. You can't take photos where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy. Austin, I like to get after my kids go to sleep or when my kids are gone on those rare occasions, I like to get in my hot tub butt naked. All right.
Okay.
So in my backyard, I want you to know that you cannot fly your drone into my backyard, my fenced backyard, and take a photo of me, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Because I have an expectation of privacy in my fenced backyard.
It's just the same way that I couldn't get a long pole and put a camera up there and take a picture of you either. It's not just the drone thing.
Yeah. So you can't fly these places all over the place where people expect privacy. That is very old, well settled law. So
I also did just look it up. I cannot fly a 500-pound drone in Texas without registering it. At that point, you actually need FAA, like a much higher certification and a pilot license.
Really?
Yeah.
That is incredible. So you actually have to have a pilot license.
So if it's over 55 pounds, yeah, you need a pilot license. Yeah.
Wow, that's really, thank you for looking that up with all kinds of things.
interesting.
So most of what we're talking about is falling within what they call recreational flight. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's, you would just think, oh, anytime I'm not getting paid for it, I'm just going to go fire up my drone and fly around. It's actually a little trickier than that, as many things are with the law. Apparently, you can't just go down the road to your high school football game and start flying your drone and taking photos of the football game, because that could be considered like commercial, even though you're not being paid for it. So there's really a very narrow definition of recreational here. Like you just fly the thing for your own enjoyment.
Yeah.
So anyway, but assume you're just flying for fun. You have the bullet points of the base. What's the first rate? Yeah.
Yeah, the bullet points. So you need to keep the drone in physical line of sight.
Okay, so that's if I'm on my computer, I can't just be flying the drone around the neighborhood, right?
No, you can't be sitting there doing your drone on your computer. No, it doesn't work. Fly below 400 feet, not above it.
Okay.
And then you have to take the recreational UAS safety test. And it does not matter what kind of drone you're using, but you have to take that test.
Okay, really? Because unless I bought my 10-year-old a drone, like my 10-year-old to go fly it in the front yard has to go take the test.
Yes, you have to go take the test. Yeah.
But that has to be one of the stupidest, like least enforced laws ever.
I don't think any of these are enforced, to be honest. Like it's probably only when someone actually has a problem with said drone that they look up these things and try to enforce them.
The next one is definitely enforced.
Yeah. You can't fly a drone over a prison. Okay, but so what if my recreation, what if my hobby is taking pictures of prisons with a drone?
Yeah. Is your hobby also using your drone to drop weapons and drugs inside the prison? Is that also your hobby?
That's more of an employment thing than a hobby.
That's how that law came out. The cartel members were flying drones over prisons and dropping weapons and drugs. That's how, and they found out because one of them crashed.
Unfortunate.
Like Jose
Use better drones.
from Venezuela, like who with the MS-13 guy or whatever was crashed his drone inside the Peruvian. Okay.
Jose.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. Now, this next one is pretty cool, actually. This is not actually good law, but in 2013, we had the Texas Privacy Act that said you could not take a photo of any property or person without consent.
Interesting.
Turns out it was overturned. Yeah.
Yeah. That is such a strange law that someone made. Like, how quickly was that overturned?
They said it passed in 2013, but I think it was first overturned by a judge in 2022. A judge out of Austin.
That's strange.
That's a long time, and people have been taking photos.
I'm guessing it just wasn't enforced, and then someone tried to enforce it, and they're like, "You can't stop me from taking a picture." House what?
It was actually the journalists wanted to use drones to do their journalistic research, and they filed a lawsuit, and then it was shot down. By a judge in Austin. You like that shot down? Okay. And what's the next one?
You can't use a drone to hunt in Texas unless you have a permit. And if you have a permit, you can use a drone to fly with shotguns attached to it and just right. That's what that means.
I think the recoil from the shotgun would potentially alter the flight pattern
unless you have the 500-pound drone.
Right.
Then at that point, you're just launching missiles at the deer, and that's probably a bad idea. Right. You should not send in one of our heat-seeking missiles to hunt for deer. To good venison. No.
And that's Texas Administrative Code Section 65.151.
Yeah.
Let me set the stage for how I think this is really being used. Now, I'm not the hunter, but I probably have more friends that hunt than you do, so I'm just going to put that out there.
Possibly. One of my sisters, her husband is really big into hunting.
We'll talk to him. But
he uses a drone though. He doesn't use a drone. Yeah.
I think the hunters are more using it to track wildlife and photograph wildlife to make them a little more easier to find them, and then they go out, and that's really not fair hunting, and it probably is going to hurt the population of some of our animals. That's what I think it is. I also think that there's a provision for getting a permit because in Texas, we have a huge wild hog problem, Austin or feral hog problem, and they destroy things. So I would guess if you have property and a ranch and you've got a hog problem, you can probably get a permit to use drones to kill as many hogs as you want. So
probably.
That would be my guess. So that's our drone law for the day. No, we have one more. We're
going to keep droning on.
We're droning on. What's the last one?
You can't use a drone in a Harris County park except in a designated area.
Which the local government code, Texas, says that no smaller jurisdictions, local governments can make laws about drones. So I would have thought that would have preempted this law. But
I wouldn't think that the Harris County local government is full of many very intelligent people. So that's probably what happened here.
I don't know how well this is being enforced, but I would think the park would be the place you want to go and fly a drone.
You would think, but in Harris County, no, you can't do it there. Not there.
I think they have one or two parks where they allow you to do it. And one is the George Bush Park, which is a big park, and I'm glad I did this research.
That's because it's a Republican park, Phil.
Yes, that's right. I'm glad I did this research though, because I think my son, my 10-year-old, actually won a little tiny cheap drone in a contest, and he gave it to me, and I was just going to go fire it up. My neighborhood backs up to a park. I was going to go fire it up, and I would have been violating the law.
Yeah, so, everyone violates the law.
Yeah. All right, well, that brings us to my favorite part of the show, which is usually our rant and rave section. Okay, but this is our lawyer facts and statistics question.
Okay.
Most of these have been taken from a Clio report, CLIO. They're a software company that we use, and some other places, reputable, sort of verifiable places across the internet that I've vetted. But we're going to go over some lawyers and facts and statistics that aren't just going to be interesting to lawyers, but also interested to the general public. Okay.
Sure.
What's the first one we have, Austin?
71% of clients prefer a flat fee over an hourly arrangement.
Are you surprised by that?
I am not at all surprised with that. I've
Not
seen
at
that in my
all.
own practice.
Yeah, we see that all the time. When we get a lot of traffic to our law firm, kind of people wanting to be wanting to offer a flat fee. Here wanting to hire a lawyer at a flat fee. Here's what's more interesting about it. More lawyers are actually offering flat fees because of AI automation. So, can you walk our listeners through why that might be?
It's easier to do things with AI.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good answer. I'm afraid there may be some ill intentions on behalf of lawyers, though, in gravitating towards a flat fee with the AI automation. And I think what's going on is where AI is now allowing lawyers to do things taking less time. So if we build that at an hourly rate, we would be shortchanging ourselves. So now we're gravitating towards flat fees. Can we say, okay, we used to charge $1,000 for an hourly time for a demand letter now, and because of AI, it takes us an hour, which would be lower on an hourly rate basis. So let's charge a flat fee so we can keep our revenues high, but then our
Yeah.
efficiency up. I think that's what's going on, which is not fair to the clients.
No, it's not.
But the free market will fix that. And here's why, because there's enough lawyers out there like our firm will say, all right, we want to be able to offer affordable rates and get more volume. If we can do more demand letters or more deeds on a lower cost to the client, save the client money, but just do more volume of them, then we will make more money. So
Sure.
there's ways to do that. And that's kind of economics 101. All right, what's our next statistic, Austin?
Yeah. Only 52% of law firms in 1,000 firm sample called potential new clients back.
Okay, that one shocked me.
That does not shock me at all. I think it's because you're not doing calls day in, day out, Phil. But that does not shock me.
Why? Well, tell me about that, because you're teaching me. What's going on now?
Oh, they just don't call people back. I think if I had to guess, they probably will just, based off of the information that they've received, they will determine whether or not they want to call the person back.
You're talking about other lawyers.
Other lawyers, they'll determine based on what other lawyers, other firms. I think they look at what either the message was, so I hope, whatever the message was, and then determine based off of that whether they think that there is actually some money in it, and they'll call them back or not. But they won't let them know. If they don't call them back, they're not going to let them know that they got it, and they're just not calling. They're just declining representation. They just don't call them back. That happens a lot of the time, I think, with people that call us, because people will tell us, oh, no, I called 5 different firms and you're the only one that called me back. Sometimes even if it's not the same day that we get back to them, right? Sometimes I'll either something comes up or something, and we usually try to get calls back the same day that we get them in. But sometimes things pop up and say I'm calling someone back 2 days after they reach out to us, and they still say the same thing. Oh, yeah, I called 7 different firms, and you're the only ones calling back, even if it's 2 days after it. So I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, it's shocking to me as a firm owner, because our culture at our firm is very much marketing driven. Is let's call the clients back, let's offer them a
Yeah.
service. And you've got a huge percentage, okay,
Yeah.
like half of all lawyers out there getting phone calls, not calling anyone back. That's what's shocking me. I guess it's that old saying, 90% of the battle is just showing up, right?
Yeah.
Just you were the lawyer that got the business because you called the potential client back. And here's the other part of that statistic that I found. Of the half that call back, only 9% actually are quoted a price at an estimate. So if you're a client out there and you call a lawyer, first of all, half of all the law firms, one will call you back. And then 9% of the half you talk to will actually quote you a price for the legal services that you need. That's crazy. I guess it's because lawyers don't want to be pinned down on a price, or they just want it to be, because litigation is unpredictable. I don't know. Do you have
Yeah,
any-
I get that. I get that in some way, but in others, I feel like even as an attorney, you should understand that in any scenario, whether it be professional services or not, like you should be able to quote a price. Like I can at least quote a price and say how much time I think something is going to take, even something that's pretty amorphous as litigation. We have an initial retainer, right?
Mm.
And yes, if someone tries to nail me down, I need to know exactly the amount of money that this litigation is going to cost. I can't tell you that, right? I can't nail you down on that one. I can tell you, I think, how much it would take if it settles early. I can give approximate amounts, but I can't give anything to nail myself down on a price like that. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
So
and that makes sense. But because I still do a lot of litigation calls. I'll give an estimate, and most of the calls we represent a lot of small
yeah,
business owners, and the guy you got some breach of contract suit, and you're going to have the typical thing: filing fees, some basic discovery. You're going to have a couple depositions. You're going to have a mediation, and then if it goes all the way, you'll have a 2-day trial, right?
yeah,
And I'll go ahead and give over a 2-year period of the lifetime of a case. I'll just say that averages $20,000 to $30,000 in legal fees at our rates of say $400 an hour on average. I don't get it. I don't know what lawyers are so scared of. If I call a plumber and I'm like, hey, what do you want to charge me to replace my garbage disposal? I expect the plumber to be able to give me some sort of
yeah.
estimate or price to fix the garbage disposal. If he can't do that,
I'm sure investment. Yeah.
yeah, I'm
And,
calling
and
the next plumber.
yeah. And like our firm, like I'm always giving a quote the first time I talk to someone, but just based on the information I have, but I'm always giving a quote. And if someone calls me back, say, if I've had people call me back a year after they initially contacted me, I'm always asking what I quoted them last time, because I want to, if I can, I want to stick to what I gave them previously, because I'm not going to remember every single quote that I gave. But yeah, you should always do that in any professional services, any really business in general. I don't know why you wouldn't.
It's bizarre. It's shocking just the little information that clients are getting, potential clients are getting from lawyers. All right, what's the next statistic we have?
Next statistic is a typical lawyer only bills 2.6 hours in 8-hour working day.
So at first, when I read that, again, as a firm owner, I was really mad. I was like, what? You're working 8 hours a day and you're only going to bill 2.6 hours. But then I thought about it from a financial standpoint. If you're one lawyer and your hourly rate is $400 an hour, and let's just use round numbers. Let's say it's 3 hours a day. Okay. Then
Sure.
you're going to bill $1,200 a day. And I guess that's about right. But my question is, what else are you doing during the day as a lawyer, Austin? If you're not, there's a lot of there's a lot of non-billable time, right?
Sure.
So, I guess you have to use the restroom some.
I don't know. I understand how easy it is to just sometimes get caught up in things that you don't want to necessarily bill a client for, but 2.6 hours a day, quite low.
That's the average across the world. And I guess
across the world.
that data came from Clio's legal trends report, and Clio has U.S. law firms, European law firms, 2.6 hours on average a day. The plus side of that, Austin, is if you bill an extra half hour a day, that's going to make a huge difference financially.
Sure.
But all right, what's our average hourly rate in Texas? This one's Texas specific. What's the average hourly rate that a Texas
$3.45 an hour?
Yes, you're going to have some country lawyers that are probably closer to 200, or some family law lawyers that are cheaper rates, right? Yeah. And then you're going to have big firm lawyers that are way high. My friends at big firms can bill $900 to $1,500 an hour, but then you're going to have our law firm right in the average. We're currently $350 to $450 an hour, so not that shocking on that hourly rate. I'll tell you, I'm going to insult some of my big firm friends that are billing $900 to $1,500 an hour. Nobody is worth that much money. So nobody. I shouldn't say nobody, because there are some situations where, let's say it's some very specialized patent litigation where there's 5 guys on the planet that have a PhD in some type of complex rocket scientist type field. And he also happens to be a lawyer, and he's going to get your patent through on some kind of thermo thrusters. I'm just throwing words out there. I don't even know if they mean anything, but that person may.
Yes. What he's saying is if it requires really specialized knowledge, like for instance, you need MD plus a JD plus a PhD or something like that, makes more sense. Right?
Yeah. If you're just a generalist litigator at a big firm, there's no way that the generalist litigator, Austin, I'm going to call it spade. Okay. There's no way that the generalist litigator at a big firm who's billing $1,500 an hour is better than you, that much better than you. He's not. Austin, you bill $400 an hour or $360 an hour. I can't remember what it is, $400 an hour. There's no way that guy is 300% better than you.
I really hope not.
Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. Let's say he's 50% better than you. Okay.
Yeah.
It's still not worth the risk reward, like
It
hiring
is not.
him in the
Yeah.
litigation file. It's crazy, especially if you have let's say you have $100,000 dispute. Okay. Your legal fees are going to far outweigh. You might as well go with it's just,
Yeah, and judges do not like scenarios where the legal fees are more than the actual damages. They do not like this.
Yeah. Oh, those have been bad. I've got another buddy of mine, and I can't mention names, okay? But he works at this very big publicly traded oil and gas company that everyone would hear about. And I was having a conversation with him, and he said, Phil, I look for value. I try to find guys that are $500 an hour that have come from big firms that have the experience. And my oil and gas company absolutely loves what I do. From a competitive advantage, I'm getting high quality legal services for $500 an hour versus maybe our competitors. Okay. The other big oil and gas company is over there hiring guys for $1,500 an hour. That makes a big difference.
Sure.
And it resonated with me because I was like, wow, if he's finding great value to represent oil and gas companies for $500 an hour, there's probably a cap on our rates, Austin. We're representing the local business or the regional business, and they're paying us $450. So these are the competitive rates. If you're out there shopping for legal services, these are probably the rates you should be looking for. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Our final statistic for the day. This one was interesting. What do we have here?
The states with the most lawyers per capita.
Yeah. And the least. We did some with the least.
And the least. Yes. And number one is, to probably no one's surprise, is New York with 9.59 lawyers per 1,000 people. So.
Yeah. And the reason that's very skewed, that's going to be because there's just so many lawyers in Manhattan. Right.
So many. So if you want to get blood sucked, go to Manhattan. Yeah.
And New York is the financial center of the world. So a lot of industry in New York. You have a lot of lawyers per 1,000. All right, what's Massachusetts?
True. Massachusetts is number 2 on that with 5.72 lawyers per every 1,000 people in the state. And in the middle of these statistics is Texas with 3.22 lawyers per every 1,000 residents.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we have South Carolina at 2.06 lawyers per every 1,000 residents. So if you want to feel really special as a lawyer, go live in South Carolina, okay? People will be very surprised.
That doesn't mean that you'll make a lot of money as a lawyer.
It doesn't mean you'll make a lot of money, but you will be special.
You'll be special.
All right.
Yeah. There you go. That brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. As a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a question or want to have us talk about something specific, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silblawfirm.com. And tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Bye.